He is a mirror no one asked for. That's the quiet scandal of his existence. While others are busy refining themselves into palatable versions of ambition, polished, performative, endlessly marketable, he simply is asterisk. He does not run, he does not posture, and in that stillness something terrible happens. People begin to see themselves reflected in him, and they do not like what they see. Because when a man refuses to chase wealth, it's not just that he declines a pursuit, it's that he renders the chase suspicious. He asks without asking, what if all this striving is just a symptom of emptiness masquerading as purpose? What if the ladder everyone is climbing isn't leaning on a real wall at all, but pressed against fog? Society despises ambiguity. It demands noise, forward motion, measurable growth. But this man, this burden, he disrupts that rhythm. He becomes a crack in the performance. He walks into the marketplace and does not buy. He enters the arena and does not compete. And suddenly the crowd isn't cheering. They're confused. They feel seen but not flattered. That's the danger of a mirror. It reveals not who you pretend to be, but who you are when no one's watching. And this man, this quiet heretic, holds up that mirror without words. He doesn't point, he doesn't accuse. He simply refuses to play. And in his refusal, he exposes the hunger of those who never question their appetites. People will call him lazy, unmotivated, even depressed, not because he is, but because that's how society punishes the uninterested. It must pathologize peace. It must diagnose detachment. Otherwise, it risks admitting that maybe, just maybe, the system is designed for endless dissatisfaction, not fulfillment. But here's what stings the most. He seems content. Not euphoric, not radiant, just unshackled. There's no nervous flicker in his eyes when he speaks. No rehearsed charm. No need to impress. He has walked away from the stage, and now he watches the performance from a seat no one else dares to occupy. He claps for no one, and that silence echoes louder than applause. In a world built on optics, he is invisible. In a world built on speed, he moves like a stone. That's why he is considered a burden, not because he slows others down, but because he makes them question why they are running in the first place. He is the pebble in the machinery, the grain of sand in the eye of society's storm. And it is easier to hate a mirror than to confront your own reflection, so they try to fix him, re-educate him, inspire him with success stories, wave trophies in his face, offer shiny distractions, but he remains. Quiet, unbothered, a living question no one knows how to answer. And that's precisely why he matters, because every culture needs someone who refuses to perform, just to remind it that it's all a performance. Let that haunt you, let that free you. He is immune to the machinery, and that makes him intolerable, not because he disrupts it violently, but because he doesn't need it to begin with. You can't bribe a man who doesn't care for your currency. You can't blackmail someone who has nothing to hide. You can't imprison someone who doesn't fear isolation. And so he slips, quietly, persistently, through the gears of civilization, uncatchable by the mechanisms designed to shape and bind the average soul. The machinery I speak of is not made of steel or circuits. It's subtler. It's composed of expectations, roles, unspoken contracts. Go to school, they say. Earn prestige. Accumulate titles, possessions, followers. Apologize for your flaws, amplify your strengths. Decorate yourself in productivity until you're too shiny to question. But he doesn't bite. He steps outside the factory line, and in doing so, reveals the conveyor belt for what it is. A grooming ground, not for character, but for obedience. And that disobedience, it's not loud, it's not rebellious in the romanticized sense. It's evasive, like trying to grab smoke. He doesn't argue with the system. He doesn't need to. His absence from it says more than protest ever could. He's not fighting the rules. He's questioning the necessity of the game. That's what unnerves people. We like dissent when it follows a script. We like rebels who still need an audience. But he does not rebel in order to be seen. He simply exits, and that is the most radical act of all. Because while most resistance still takes place within the architecture of the machine critics trying to reform it or outperform it, he exposes the architecture itself as optional. Not wrong, just not required. You must understand this man is not against structure. He's against unconscious slavery to it, and his immunity lies in his awareness. He sees the invisible levers, status anxiety, corporate theater, performative morality, and he refuses to pull them. Not because he's angry, but because he's awake. He knows the machinery feeds off fear, fear of being irrelevant, unattractive, forgotten. But what happens when a man is unafraid of being irrelevant? What happens when applause becomes noise instead of validation? He becomes immune, and immunity in this context is dangerous, not to him, but to the machine that needs his compliance to survive. There's a strange kind of loneliness in that immunity, of course. When you no longer respond to the same cues, the world starts to sound foreign. Conversations become scripts, friendships turn transactional, but he doesn't resent this. He expected it. He knows that when you stop being manipulable, you stop being relatable, and so he walks alone, not as a martyr, but as a sovereign. We think the strongest are those who climb the system, but perhaps the strongest are those who quietly step outside it, not with bitterness, but with clarity. And if you feel threatened by someone who doesn't want what you want, ask yourself why. Because often, what we call threatening is just a glimpse of freedom we haven't yet dared to claim. He undermines the myth of progress simply by refusing to bow before it. Not through protest, not through rhetoric, but through absence. A quiet opt-out that disturbs more than open rebellion. Because when a man no longer orients his life around what's next, he inadvertently casts doubt on the entire architecture of the forward-driven world. He challenges the sacred assumption that movement is always meaningful, that growth is inherently good, that acceleration is synonymous with enlightenment. Progress has become our modern deity. It's dressed in data, clothed in speed, armed with graphs and deadlines. We speak of it with reverence *, advancement *, innovation *, success *. It promises salvation but demands sacrifice, time, selfhood, depth, and most willingly submit. They reshape their lives around it, never asking what exactly they're progressing * toward *, only that they must keep moving, producing, improving endlessly. But this man doesn't. He steps off the treadmill. Not out of laziness, but lucidity. He sees that what we call progress often serves no soul. That the pursuit of more wealth, more status, more visibility isn't always a journey, but sometimes a spiral. Not a staircase upward, but a loop designed to keep you too busy to ask dangerous questions. And in stepping out, he becomes one of those questions. He doesn't need to argue against the myth. His life is its quiet contradiction. He doesn't optimize, he doesn't network, he doesn't grind, and yet he is undeniably alive not surviving, not scheming, simply being, and that being, stripped of urgency, suggests a blasphemous possibility. Maybe all our striving is not evidence of meaning, but a distraction from its absence. Of course, this suggestion cannot be tolerated. It would require society to admit that the ladders it offers might lead nowhere, just higher platforms of dissatisfaction, better views of the void, and so he is labeled inefficient, unambitious, even regressive. Because if he's not chasing goals, he must be drifting. If he's not progressing, he must be decaying. That's the false dichotomy the system feeds us, move or rot. But what if the third option is * to see clearly *? What if pausing isn't failure, but insight? He reveals that progress, as it's sold to us, is a shell game, a shifting target designed to keep us discontent enough to serve, but hopeful enough not to quit. And when someone walks away from that illusion without bitterness, he exposes it not as an enemy, but as a fiction. That's the most destabilizing truth of all, not that the system is cruel, but that it's unnecessary for the soul's survival. He becomes a whisper in the collective ear, one that says, maybe what you're chasing isn't freedom, it's distraction dressed in aspiration. And once you hear that whisper, it's hard to unhear. So the question is no longer how fast you're moving, but whether you're moving toward something real, or merely running from the silence that might reveal what you've become. He lives without contracts, and that alone makes him intolerable. In a world built on the unspoken agreements of mutual use, where most relationships are transactions in disguise, he is the rare figure who moves without needing to be needed, without needing to be understood, without needing anything at all. And that absence of need confuses people. It unsettles them because most aren't really living, they're bartering, their smiles are negotiations, their kindness a form of leverage, their presence conditional. But not him. He doesn't offer you anything to gain. He isn't networking. He's not positioning himself. He doesn't ask, what can I get from this? Or even, how can I be seen? He simply is asterisk. And in being without expectation, he becomes a rupture in the social contract everyone else unconsciously signs. He does not perform, not even the performance of sincerity. You cannot guilt him into acting a certain way. You cannot flatter him into agreement. You cannot shame him with silence, nor seduce him with promises of belonging. He has forfeited the psychological currency that keeps society afloat, validation. And when a man stops trading in approval, he becomes unintelligible to those who depend on it for self-definition. That's the danger. He breaks the invisible contracts we all pretend aren't there. The contract that says, if I make myself smaller, you will like me. Or, if I play the game well enough, you'll reward me with significance. These are the silent terms we agree to out of fear. Fear of being left, ignored, dismissed. But when he opts out, he reveals that these terms were always optional. And that is a scandal most people cannot stomach. Because once you realize someone is operating without emotional debt, you are forced to confront how indebted you've become, how many of your behaviors are just repayments for approval you never asked for, or apologies for your own existence. He walks without owing. He speaks without selling. He loves when he does without possession. There is no hook in his generosity, no leash in his presence. He doesn't even need to forgive, because he never signed the contract that would allow him to be betrayed. He is free in a way that looks alien, because real freedom is not glamorous. It's unsettling. It leaves nothing to grip onto, no handholds, no leverage points, and so he is called distant, cold, arrogant, not because he is, but because he reminds others how dependent they are on being needed, being liked, being heard. His existence pulls the curtain back on the desperate bargains we make just to feel tethered. In truth, he isn't a burden because he asks for too much. He's a burden because he asks for nothing, and in doing so, dares you to wonder if your endless giving, pleasing, earning, was ever really love at all. Sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one who refuses to sign the contract everyone else believes is sacred. He can't be controlled or predicted, and that's where his real threat lies. Not in violence, not in confrontation, but in unpredictability. In his refusal to respond to the usual cues. Society thrives on predictability, not just in economics or behavior, but in desire. It expects people to want the same things, chase the same symbols, fear the same consequences. When someone deviates from that script, it causes unease, not because they're dangerous in action, but because they're illegible. If you can't predict a man, you can't manipulate him. And if you can't manipulate him, he becomes ungovernable. Most people are taught from birth how to be legible, how to signal success, how to signal remorse, how to signal loyalty. You don't just learn what to feel, you learn how to perform it. When to lower your voice, when to nod, when to smile, when to apologize even when you're not sorry. Society doesn't demand authenticity, it demands coherence. But this man, the one who has stepped outside the system, he isn't incoherent, he's just no longer performing the right cues. He doesn't fear being misunderstood. He doesn't calibrate his choices to avoid suspicion or ensure approval. He isn't erratic, but neither is he linear. There's no algorithm that can chart him. He won't do today what pleased the crowd yesterday. And he won't flinch in the face of their withdrawal. That kind of self-containment makes him immune to the mechanisms of social punishment. Shame, ridicule, exclusion, the usual tools fail. He doesn't crack. He doesn't chase re-entry, he simply continues. People say they want freedom, but what they usually mean is controlled flexibility, a curated rebellion, but real freedom is opaque. It doesn't explain itself. And so when he acts, it's not to provoke, but it provokes anyway. Because his actions are not rooted in consensus or consequence. They arise from internal logic, private values, invisible coordinates. He doesn't shout about liberty, he lives it so plainly that it startles. You cannot coerce a man who does not fear losing access. You cannot seduce a man who does not crave recognition. You cannot train a man who does not submit to reward. This is why society treats him like a glitch, a fracture in the code. If one man can live beyond praise or punishment, then what becomes of the rest who depend on it for structure? He becomes proof that obedience is not instinctual, it's learned. And more disturbingly, that it can be unlearned. He doesn't aim to dismantle systems that would still place the system at the center. He simply orbits elsewhere, a quiet refusal, a different gravitational field. He is no longer reacting, he is originating. An origin, when not approved or explained, is seen as a threat. But he is not a threat to peace, he is a threat to programming. That's why they fear him. When a man can't be predicted, he reveals how easily the rest of us have become programmable. Let that sting, let it wake you. He reveals the truth people avoid, and that is perhaps his most unforgivable act. Not because he preaches it, he doesn't carry a message or a manifesto. His life is the message. A slow, quiet unraveling of the illusion that most people spend their entire lives protecting. He doesn't tell you that you're lost. He simply walks in a way that makes you question your own direction. It's not his words that disturb. It's the absence of desperation in his choices, the absence of noise. He doesn't fill silence with distractions. He doesn't escape into urgency. He lets time stretch. He lets meaning breathe, and in doing so, he exposes the artificiality of the world others live in. The man who doesn't chase wealth or approval doesn't just live differently. He forces you to confront the terrifying possibility that you might be chasing what doesn't matter. That's the real wound, not that he's right, but that he might be, because if fulfillment isn't found in accumulation or applause, then everything we've been taught to want begins to rot under its own weight. And no one wants to admit that. No one wants to admit that they've built their identity on scaffolding that was never real. It's easier to call him lost, to label him fringe or deluded, than to entertain the mirror he offers. Because his reflection does not flatter, it indicts. He does not escape discomfort, he embraces it. He does not flee from emptiness, he listens to it. He knows that emptiness is not a flaw, but a signal. A call to return to something quieter, something beneath the layers of noise we mistake for life. And in honoring that signal, he becomes whole in a way others cannot understand. They have mistaken busyness for purpose for so long that stillness feels like a threat. And it is because stillness speaks, stillness asks, what remains when everything external is taken away? He has answered that question, or at least dared to face it without blinking. That's why they cannot follow him, and also why they can't look away. He's not admirable in the way success is admirable. He is disruptive in the way truth is disruptive. Not tidy, not packaged, but piercing. He doesn't speak from a podium. He speaks in the way his eyes don't dart. In the way he doesn't try to be convincing. In the way he chooses solitude over spectacle, depth over noise, essence over performance, and that quiet clarity is more jarring than any shout. People call him a burden because they don't want to carry what he reveals. But what he reveals is necessary. He is not a mirror this time, but a key, a small, inconvenient key to the door most are too afraid to open. But that door leads to your real life, the one waiting beneath the script. And until you walk through it, everything else will feel like a rehearsal.